Okay, the interview is about to start, but I just wanted to give a very quick forward. Number one, I just want to remind everybody that there are no perfect set of macros or exact perfect way of doing any diet that is going to be just what everyone needs. Secondly, if what you are already doing is working for you, I don't see any reason to change it. Number three, simple is always best as long as it's working. So I know that some of you have seen me do the simplest form of carnivore for many years, and that was just eating tons of burger patties all day long. And it worked great for me. And if it's working for you, have at it. That's awesome. I had no reason to change, except I just kept seeing that it really wasn't working for a select portion of the carnivore population. And for those people, they really may need something different, and it might seem more complicated. I hate complicated. But humans can be a little complex, and some people have decades of insulin resistance. Some people have poor absorption issues in their gut. There are people with all manner of health problems, and healing some of that can get really complicated. So, if the simplest version of something is working, I think you should go with that. And if it's not, maybe dig deeper, but don't give up. My primary concern is I just simply want you to feel your best in whatever way you get there to live your most optimal, healthy life, whether that looks super simple or not. And I hope that something Stephanie or I share in this video will be helpful to you. Okay, let's do this. Hey everybody, welcome back to my Zero Carb Life. I am Kelly Hogan, and I have a guest that you might not have expected to see on my channel. This is Stephanie Person. She sometimes goes by Stephanie Keto Person. Many of you have known about her for a long time. She has been on the Dr. Oz, not Boz, Dr. Oz show. She has been keto for 15 years, following high fat, moderate protein. So thank you so much for coming on to talk.
Thank you so much for inviting me and just being a very bright light for everybody.
Thanks. All right, Stephanie. About a week ago, I posted this video with Amber O'Hearn, where she also has been a huge proponent for high fat, moderate protein carnivore for a very long time. She and I both started carnivore in 2009 together, so 13 years ago. But I ended up sticking more with high protein. I don't even know what you would call it. I was basically eating 8 burger patties a day. So it was about 70% of calories from fat, definitely not high fat, very moderate. But Amber found very quickly that she did better with high fat, as did you very early in your journey. And with your clients, you discovered it worked. When I talked to Amber, we were talking about protein minimum requirements. And the number one question I've had in the past week is people like panicking, like, is this going to be enough protein? Is it safe? How do you know this is safe? Because it seems so low on protein. What are your thoughts?
Okay, where do I start? Because there's a lot.
Okay.
First of all, the point is to be ketotic. So I didn't really discover fat. It was the premise of everything. I actually ate almost the double fat from the very beginning than I do right now. I ate about 400 grams of fat. And I was just like pounding it down. My journey started with my mom developing a glioblastoma, which is the most aggressive brain tumor. So I heard about the ketogenic diet years ago, but I didn't know anything about it. All I knew is that epileptic patients did well on it and that it could stop cancer. That's all I knew. So the premise of me starting is a lot different than most people. I had no health issues that I was aware of at the time. This was all from my mom. And so I just slammed the fat down with her. And then, of course, I really kicked it into full drive with myself. I was worried about not having energy at the gym. So the more fat, the better, because you cannot get a good source of energy from protein. Your energy must come from fats or carbohydrates, right? Because you cannot fill your muscles with protein, glycogen. It's not, you can't. So you're going to be running on low energy. And what happens is, and maybe what has happened with you and other people, is that you tap into your adrenal system to get energy. So a lot of people can say, well, I've been doing this diet or whatever diet, and they're like, oh, I feel great. And so they won't understand the macro breakdown and understand that you actually can go into your adrenal system go into a process called gluconeogenesis and get energy from it. So when it comes to the macros, what I've learned, not only scientifically, but pretty much mainly through clients, the macronutrient breakdown of how do you get yourself into a state of ketosis so your body runs on fat. So when you're saying like, well, what about your muscles? What do you do? And I have to kind of go backwards a little bit and go, well, we're trying to reach ketosis. That's the goal. Well, basically how this works is that you first have to get your body to develop the enzymes to even break down ketones. You have to get your body into a homeostatic balance because stress creates high blood sugar. High blood sugar blunts your keto adaptation or the ability to use uptake viable ketones. And so if your blood glucose is high, or if your ketones are suppressed, or your ketones are too high, you'll see it on the glucometer. So I started working with people years and years and years ago after listening to Jeff Volek and Steve Finney on ketones. And I did the ultimate test with as many people using glucometers the entire time. So you won't get that from most of the doctors today. Yeah. That is something that I've been doing religiously with people. So it's all just this guesstimation. What is keto? What does it feel like to be in ketosis to where you're eating high fat? And how are you supposed to feel? And how is the mechanisms behind it to get into ketosis? So you eat high fat. And when I start working with clients and their fat was too low, then their hypoglycemia persisted. Their hair kept falling out. If they had an underlying lying thyroid disorder and their fats were too low. So I just kept cranking it up. And the sweet spot is not for everyone. It's very general, but we have to start with some kind of number, was 200 grams of fat.
Per day.
That's per day. Yes. Not per meal, per day. And that I don't include the cooking process. And I don't include olive oil. I can include only animal fats. Okay. So when it comes to this whole issue with protein, and that's very interesting. So obviously I have muscle, obviously. Yes. And that's with being 55. Yeah, well, here's the thing. There's two things you need to think about really when it comes to staying lean and building muscle. Okay. Number one is that your hormones must be balanced, right? Your 3 estrogens, progesterone, and testosterone. That's number one, especially women who are going from 40s to 50s on up. The second thing is that you need is a good insulin sensitivity. When you're insulin sensitive, now you only need like a little bit of insulin to then take whatever protein is in your blood and push it into the muscle cell. Now the requirement for protein is 10,000 times less. Everyone who's insulin resistant is going to have a difficult time getting protein into the muscle. Okay. Every single person. If you're insulin resistant, more and more bodybuilders begin to eat more and more carbs, trying to raise their insulin enough to drive protein into the muscle so they'll grow, so they get muscular and fat.
Okay.
See, that's why you get those bloated bodybuilders on the off season. Well, none of us want that, especially us women. Yeah. So essentially, most people will store their sugars as fat. Protein will always convert into sugar, what you cannot use for structure, period.
Structure. Is what structure. Yes.
Okay. Your heart cells, all cells that have protein, all cells need protein. They need amino acids. And it's not just your muscles, your collagen, your bone marrow, a bunch of stuff, your reproductive system. Okay. And so what happens is when people don't eat enough protein, or vegans, for example, their body will start to rob from their muscle reserves to then feed their fledgling, for the need for protein. The body will always rob from itself when you don't give it dietarily what it needs. Okay. And so with people who are insulin sensitive like myself, I don't need a lot of protein because my protein strength, my insulin strength, that little bit of insulin sensitivity, it sounds weak, sensitive, no, but that insulin sensitivity is when you're super healthy and your body will take all the protein that you consume and use it effectively and efficiently.
Everybody does have a minimum because we have to have some protein. We couldn't just fat fast, for example, forever. Our
No.
structure does need some protein, and some of that is going to depend on how insulin sensitive you are and perhaps how active you are, how well you're absorbing things. But do you have a general ballpark in all of
I
your clients for 15 years of a good minimum point?
Yeah, well, most people are not super athletes. They're just
Right.
sort of gym warriors where they go after work or before work and go to the gym. So for women, it depends on your height, your age, your your bone density, and all that. But if I get really vague, it's from 45 grams of protein to maybe 70 max. But the
Okay.
sweet spots are really between 55 and 65.
Okay.
So women who I had a woman, she was 4'7". A
Mhm.
4'7" woman who's 50 something is not going to need, 70 grams of protein,
Yeah.
80 grams of protein, 100 grams of protein. All of that excess protein not only will be difficult on her biliary duct system, where she's got to push protein byproducts through her kidneys, and potentially constipate her,
Mhm.
but it's also going to convert back into sugar, which is going to convert back into fat. I lift, so I could go up to probably 80 grams of protein and
Okay.
not experience hypoglycemia. That's why I'm just so anti all this, like you per pound, per kilo, per pound of body
Mhm.
weight. I'm like, I don't care about that at all, because so many people have hypochlorhydria.
Yeah.
They've got poor kidney function, and they cannot consume all that protein. They're insulin resistant, a lot of people. So we have to look at these figures. It can be around what they're saying, but
Mhm.
it can be so off if you have low stomach acid, which would mean your protein would have to go down even further. Or let's say if they're telling you that you should go to 68 grams of protein,
Okay.
but really you can only consume 55 grams of protein because of hypochlorhydria.
And so you're saying that no matter what a math problem says, if you check your own glucose and your own glucose is spiking up at this 71 grams of protein, then that was wrong because you need less than that.
This, what you said was perfect. This was great. If you use a glucometer, right, and you can
Mhm.
really test how you feel. Years ago, I would talk about not eating too much protein. This is way before carnivore became trendy, period. And because keto people started eating a lot of protein. And I was like, what about the science of ketosis? I guess, where your body uses fat as fuel. But if you actually break it down, if your blood sugar, with all the people that I work with, when your blood sugar is too high, why would it use ketones?
Right.
If your blood sugar is still high, like you've eaten carbohydrates, which why is your blood sugar in the 90s if you haven't had any starches or sugars? So then you've got to go, well, what's going on? So yes, eating protein, I'm telling you, go eat like 2 pounds of beef and watch your blood sugar.
And I really do believe that everybody's threshold seems to be a little different in as far as how they handle protein. And I
Yes,
am one of those that really, I mean, on a CGM, I could stay at like 85 around the clock.
there are people that can tolerate higher amounts of protein. That is correct. And there are people who cannot. That part you are 100% correct. If you're insulin resistant, then
Yeah.
that protein is not going to be able to get into the cells because the insulin is not functioning properly. It's not signaling the cells properly.
Yes.
Properly. This is what every doctor says, and everybody still walks away confused.
Yes. So a person who is insulin sensitive is going to utilize their protein in a really different way than someone who's really insulin resistant. And I think this is partly why people have such different ideas about protein needs. Stephanie, when I looked online, I was thinking, gosh, I've heard her say like 45 to 65 grams of protein per day is enough for most women. Thought that seems so low. So I decided to look online at what does the average person eat? Because I wanted something to make me feel good about eating that low protein. Girl, the global average protein consumption is 68 grams per day. This is not like we are suddenly doing something so much lower than the rest of the world.
I would say that eat the amount of protein that your body can utilize
Yes.
and your hormones can deal with, and
Okay.
have enough stomach acid. If I'm gonna make this super simple, that if you don't have enough protease or pepsin or caloric acids in your stomach, you're not gonna break down high amounts of protein. So that plays a huge role. The other thing is if you are insulin resistant, you're not going to drive protein because people do not know that insulin also drives protein into the muscle so your body can use amino acids. If all of those systems are failing, or if your kidneys, if you're chronically dehydrated and your kidneys cannot deal with the high volume of protein waste products, then you're going to have to go lower. And so
Okay.
you are correct. Typically in the standard American diet world of carbohydrates, the amount of protein that we would consume at a restaurant, they put about 4 ounces on the
Yes.
plate. In a standard American diet of the world, yes, people ate lower amounts of protein and still they grew muscle.
Yeah, I had no clue. I thought, oh my gosh, Stephanie is doing something off the charts. No, this is the amount of protein that most humans have always consumed. All right, you typically eat like 3 meals per day. Is that usually right?
Nah, I eat all day long pretty much, like, but it's small amounts, right? So I have a local butcher that sells pork belly. He grows his own pigs, he's got his own pasture pigs. And so he's always got like hunks of pork belly, and I'm like, can you just cut this into bacon strips? And it's between 85 to about 97% fat
Yes.
on these strips of pork belly. And I'll just go and plop plop in my mouth. Sometimes I'll do that as a pre-workout.
What do you think is the most ounces of meat that you would typically eat at a time? Just maybe three or four?
3 or 4.
Yeah.
It's like the only time I think that I might eat more is when I'm at a restaurant and they give me more,
Yeah.
because I don't care. If I'm at somebody's house and they put a huge slab of meat on my plate, I'm not even gonna blink. I'll just eat it.
I've
That's
been
cool.
doing mini meals, about 4 ounces. Let's say 3 to 4, but it's mostly four, with a large amount of fat, like fat trimmings. I started off with butter, Stephanie. I was doing so much butter, but I found that I was getting a little acid refluxy feeling in my throat, and it went away when I switched to just animal fat. So
That's probably histamine.
that's what I'm thinking too. And my sleep is better without the butter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's butter is mostly fat, but there's tiny amounts of the protein, whey, and casein still left in it. And if you're very sensitive to dairy, if you've got any type of leaky gut, which we all still have a little, because we're still constantly exposed to stuff that compromises our gut wall, even though we do these
Sure.
diets, you might have a small reaction to it. And it can come into the form of anything: acid reflux, a headache, tired. It doesn't have to be like mucus and like severe allergy symptoms that you would assume.
I have definitely felt better. The switch. And I know some people love the butter. It's easier. Just go buy a box of butter. But I'm just asking my butcher for the fat trimmings. It's very cheap. It's not quite free, but what is? It's very cheap. And oh my gosh. Yeah, just clearing up that little burny taste in my throat. Well worth it for me. All right. So, Stephanie, I know that you have done carnivore exclusively for yourself for a while, and you also feel like it is perfectly not just fine for you, but you even feel great adding back some avocado or broccoli or
Well,
some
that's for the
plants.
electrolytes. That was for the electrolytes and also to develop in methyltransferase and diamine oxidase. So that's why I did it.
Okay. For somebody out there, maybe like myself, who had really bad IBS and felt so much better, you know, that relief that you hear from people sometimes when they cut out all those plants and I'm just going to eat animal products. Let's say you get a client like myself who's like, Stephanie, I ain't doing it. I'm not going to eat any plants. What would in your vision the perfect carnivore diet look like for you?
Make it a ketotic version of carnivore where you can run on ketones, because again, that protein, the high amounts of protein can be problematic for your electrolyte
Okay.
imbalances. If you don't know you're chronically dehydrated and you're consuming tons of protein, there are waste products called purines, and they're going to have to go and be filtered through the kidneys. And so a lot of people developing back pain and weird pains they didn't realize. So there's that. Well, I'm super against fiber because you don't need fiber to poop, which is correct. But you might need a matrix of some kind to have if you need to heal the gut wall at some point, you're going to have to introduce some, even if it's soil based probiotics into your system. The thing that might help is to eat fish bones that might have a matrix.
A lot of us have been eating sardines with the bones included. Is that
That's fine.
is that what you're saying partly is like the
Mhm.
matrix would be included in that?
Yeah.
When you
Now there's also the problem of the electrolyte issue. If you couldn't do, let's say, oyster extract, which is pretty high, meat broth, not bone broth. I'm not a bone broth person because there's glutamate in bone broth and oxalates that become liberated in the water. So I prefer that people eat bone marrow that's baked and spoon out the bone marrow for the nutrient benefits that way rather than the bone broth. But you could do a meat stock soup broth,
okay.
which will have a sizable amount potassium that's liberated in that water.
I've been eating those canned oysters ever since our conversation the other day. I love them. I do not love as they're going in my mouth, especially the first time.
Right.
There is something afterwards pretty remarkable about how I feel after these oysters.
They're
Like,
so loaded in nutrients. They got vitamin C in them. They've got zinc in them. They got iodine. So a lot of women have thyroid issues. If you can get it from the sea, and if you're not reacting to oysters or the extract, go for that. So good
okay.
for you.
I know that in the past you've sometimes been like, oh my gosh, carnivores, because what it turned into was eat 2 to 3 pounds of beef per day, the end, right? And you saw what it was doing to glucose, you saw it was going up, and you saw what it was doing to ketones. And you would then get clients who were not feeling well, their energy wasn't great. And I was seeing some of that too. I had somebody the other day said, I've eaten nothing but approximately 2 pounds of meat per day, and they became diabetic doing it. And that doesn't surprise you at all.
I think that anybody who's become diabetic doing that probably had insulin resistance before.
Yeah.
So their ability to regulate their hormones was already jacked up. And then with eating so much protein, their body's not using it. They're insulin resistant. They're already like kind of having high blood sugar or high insulin. And
Yeah.
then they start slamming down the protein. And yes, then their blood sugars can go from like 130 up. I think these people who develop diabetes probably already had underlying um, insulin resistance. And I'm going to tell you right now, most people have blood sugar dysregulation, hormone problems, chronically dehydrated, and have thyroid problems without knowing it. You want to know if somebody's healthy. If they're over 40, you can't hide from. I mean, I'm going to be 55 tomorrow, so you cannot. I know
Cool.
you're. We're both. You just. Did you have a birthday?
No,
Oh, why did I
January.
think you were Virgo? Okay. Um, the point is, when you get older, you cannot hide
Yeah.
things, right? You can't hide behind youth. If your collagen is starting to go away and you start to develop loose jowls,
Mhm.
you lose that line. Now you're only 44, so like when you get into your 50s, you really see it in women when age really in the because they start going through menopause
Yeah.
and what they do, like we're talking about the carnivore diet or trying to be ketotic carnivore, what they do, every single thing they do is so important. So protein amounts, fat amounts, knowing if they have hypochlorhydria or not, knowing if they have a thyroid problem, knowing if they have insulin resistance. It's like you really should know what your health is doing prior to doing any massive dietary change.
All right. So for you, I think the frustration with carnivore diet was this push, push, push of more, more, more meat. If it's not working, you need more meat. And you were saying that that was not what was working. But if you were to hear of someone doing carnivore diet, but it looked more like a few meals per day with a few ounces of meat and
Even if you have a bite of fatty meat, like
uh
I said, if I'm gonna have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but in between, I might just go and grab a slice of pork belly and
yeah,
plop it in my mouth, or I put a spoon of fat in my mouth, or drink some broth. I can put egg yolks in there. I can put butter. I can put lard, tallow, whatever. Then
yeah.
that's going to be advantageous. It's not like you have to sit down at a table and eat all day.
Okay. So you don't even limit it to just 3 meals per day, just throughout the day, smaller amounts of actual like meat, but with you don't limit fat, correct?
Well,
It's
the
not like
reason, no, 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 no,
no.
unless you have a
Okay.
gallbladder problem,
Okay.
which a lot of people do. But no, the reason for this is that most of you guys do not have blood sugar stability.
Mhm.
So eating food, believe it or not, will stabilize the glucagon hormone with the insulin. They have to work together. And so most people have some sort of hypoglycemia. If they get tired in the afternoon, if they're super tired in the morning, if they're waking up in the middle of the night, most likely they have some type of hypoglycemia that they're not aware of. Just eat as much fat. See, people are like, so there's no limit to fat. So like you just eat it. I'm like, first of all, you need a gallbladder, you need lipase. Your body will tell you, okay, we hitting like 250, 300 if you're a man, 300, 400. After that, you lose your appetite. You're not hungry for more fat. So
Okay.
you don't have to scrimp on the fat. The point is to get the signaling, to get your brain to understand that you're trying to be ketotic on carnivore,
Mhm.
so you can have sustained energy. Because like I said, if you are relying on large amounts of protein for fuel, you're going to feel tired and going to hit some hypoglycemic slumps. Or like you said, have your glucose spike skyrocketed high, which would present some type of diabetes or insulin resistance. It's
Okay.
called physiological insulin resistance rebounding effect. So yeah, there's a limit, and I don't like numbers. I mean, you might be more of the number tracker. I'm more looking at, I don't know, but I really look at people's symptomology,
Mhm.
what their current health is, and then I'll go based on that. And then of course with the large body of people that I work with, that I've come around 200 grams. Now sometimes if you've been ketotic for a long periods of time, then your body's very efficient at burning fat, period. You don't have to keep getting your body, because the first thing you do is you eat fat, and your body learns how to convert the dietary fat into ketones.
Mhm.
That's the point. People seem to do really well with mental cognition and the hormones balancing out and all of this stuff. Like some women are going through perimenopause and they're like all over the place. All of a sudden they smoothen out once they get over 200 grams of fat
Okay.
throughout
200
the day.
grams of fat spread throughout the day
Yeah,
seems to be
you
a
can go
sweet
higher.
spot.
You can do
Okay.
200 to 300, but you're not going to, especially as a woman, you're not going to keep going higher and higher and higher unless you're doing kinds of fats like I was doing. I was doing like almond butter and
Okay.
just junk fats, that the nut butters. And I was like, oh my God, I'm eating 400 grams of fat.
Mhm.
I did gain weight, but I didn't gain a lot, but I still gained weight with a bunch of nut butters.
And you would prefer it not only to not be nut butters, but not even coconut oil, correct?
I realized that people's ketones weren't really getting higher on coconut oil. I'm
Okay.
not a supplement pusher. I'm like, if you can be as natural as possible, that's what I suggest. The only supplement that I push is magnesium, because you just can't get it high enough on foods.
Okay. I've been trying to incorporate some more magnesium into my
I
life.
know, you showed me. That's
Yeah,
cool.
like via, I think, what were the ones we talked about? I know oysters have some, was it mackerel has some magnesium?
Mhm.
So taking some Epsom bath, like just soaking in some Epsom bath. They have magnesium oils that you can rub on
Mhm.
your skin,
Mhm. You
some
could,
solution.
yeah. Let me see. You could do a magnesium chloride on the skin,
Yeah.
and that would suffice.
All right. I know you're about to have a client in like 6 minutes. Carnivore diet for someone that is insulin resistant, small meals, lots of fat, around 200 grams, more if they can handle it and they want it.
Mm.
Incorporate fish is a great idea. Find a way to get some magnesium, you say, is a great idea. I don't know. I've been really fascinated since our talk the other day to really look into where you can get potassium and magnesium. And some people are finding, their electrolytes just seem to be very easily balanced without a lot of effort.
If you research it yourself, you're going to see how important it is to just really know what's going on with your electrolytes and how you feel too.
Yeah. Well, because of you, I'm eating things I was not normally eating. I am feeling good. And I'll tell you, my now that I am doing the smaller meals with large amounts of fat, my blood sugar is running about 75 and my ketones are like 2.5 to 3 every morning first thing. And I feel really good. It's been
That's
awesome.
awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's good.
You know what? The thing that I love about you is that you are open-minded to even talk to someone like me, because we've shared very different ideology from the very beginning, and you weren't offended. And you've been even as open-minded to hear me out, hear some things, and incorporate some things. And I just think that's awesome. And the fact that you decided to up your fat and trying to teach people to lower the protein, that they don't have to consume so much protein, is also admirable. So I really, really, really like that you're doing that. It doesn't matter that we don't share the same ideology on everything, but you are definitely getting people to wake up to better health. I'm not anti-carnivore. I just want people to do it in a healthy and safe way. So that's it. That's the reason why I'm like the Simon Cowell of these diets. And I sound negative, but I'm actually trying to help people.
I love that. I love you, Stephanie. Thank you for coming on. How could I not listen to you? Look at you.
Oh,
Yes,
thanks.
you have the experience, but you also have like the proof in how you've lived this for so long. You haven't been doing this 2 whole months. It's been many, many years. So thanks for coming on, Stephanie. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.